Welcome back, everybody, to the Tennessee Titans franchise here on Madden 23. Today we will be previewing the 2023 NFL Draft, which will be in the next episode, premiering likely this Sunday, which should be a lot of fun. We have made it through free agency, we've made it through trade season, we've made it through retirements. Tom Brady led the retirement class of players, multiple future Hall of Famers calling it a career. We did re-sign some familiar faces, but we lost a lot of guys. Ben Jones ended up retiring, we traded Ryan Tannehill to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we lost a number of our starters from last year's team to free agency. However, we were able to replace them with some guys in free agency, adding players such as Mecole Hardman, Eric McCoy, Juan Thornhill, amongst others. I think we got younger, I think we got maybe a little bit better in free agency, and we certainly set ourselves up here in the draft where we don't have a bunch of glaring holes, and we can really focus on drafting the best player available on the board, because that's really what the NFL Draft is all about. Adding talent regardless of where it is on the field. You want to add guys who can make impacts. One of the big storylines we talked about at the end of the last episode is Justin Jefferson's trade request from the Minnesota Vikings. As you see here, he doesn't fit any of the criteria of wanting to play with the Vikings. He needs a new contract. The Vikings were pretty bad last year, so it all kind of makes sense. And we could see him get traded in a draft night blockbuster, which we'll really be monitoring in the next episode. So what we're going to do here is we're going to run through the entire draft class again. I've had a number of prospect profiles throughout the season, so in case you missed those, I'll leave a card at the top right of your screen so you can go and check them out. And then we're going to talk mock drafts towards the end of the episode. If you follow the New York Knicks series I have on the channel, this is going to be a very similar upload to the draft preview that I released last night. So buckle in your seatbelts. Let's have some fun. As we start at the quarterback position, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion at this point in time that Georgia's Clyde Williamson will be the number one overall pick. Williamson entered the season projected as a top prospect, and he did not disappoint, leading Georgia to the national title game, beating South Alabama and winning the college football playoff. Clyde Williamson performed really, really well, not just in the playoff, but in Georgia's big games throughout the season. Obviously, I think the ceiling is pretty high with him, but his floor is really, really high. He's going to be a really good starting quarterback right away because he's so polished and he's so pro-ready. The Detroit Lions own the number one pick in the draft. They cut Jared Goff in the offseason because they had an out in his contract. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion that Clyde Williamson is going to be a Detroit Lion next year, rocking the Honolulu blue. We knew he was going to be a high pick at the beginning of the season, but we did not see Masaru Lee projecting himself as a possible top 5 pick, but Lee really broke out this season for Oklahoma, winning the Heisman Trophy. He did lose to Clyde Williamson and the Georgia Bulldogs in the SEC Championship game, but Lee played very well in that matchup, and he also had a great season. I don't think he's quite on the top echelon as a prospect that Clyde Williamson is on, but he is just a tier below, and I could see him going as high as the number 2 overall pick, although there are some teams at the top who may prefer defense over a quarterback. Genesis Moon out of Florida could be a surprising first-round QB. He's probably going to be the third quarterback off the board and could sneak his way into the late first round for a team who may be looking to add to the QB position. Moon had a pretty good season this year at Florida and has certainly earned the opportunity to be a possible first-round pick. We get to the next tier of guys like Jackson Kayuma, Shiloh McDuff, and Jonah Mollywire, all of whom are pretty solid day 2 projected quarterbacks. But I think the name to really watch in this range is Benedict Sparrow, the young redshirt sophomore out of Texas. Benedict Sparrow is one of the more polarizing prospects in this class because we know he can make throws like this, and for every good throw like that, he has really bad throws such as this interception you'll see right here. Benedict Sparrow threw 21 interceptions this season, leading all of college football. Sparrow had plenty of NFL talent around him and did not capitalize. However, the physical upside with there is him, which is why he's being looked at as likely a 4th-round pick at this stage in time. As we look down the board in this draft class, looking for guys in day 3, there are multiple quarterbacks here who I think could become pretty decent players. Even as you go down to the undrafted guys, You have players here like Kendrick Brown and Cedric Woods who performed well in the college football playoff. The name to really watch here, though, is Sosa Hupie out of Notre Dame. At the beginning of the season, he was projected to be a first-round pick. It was him and Clyde Williamson at the top of this class, and while Williamson kept his stock as a top prospect, Sosa Hupie did not. Obviously, hindsight is 2020, but I'm not really sure why we considered Hupie to be a first-round prospect to begin with. He has never really succeeded in his collegiate career at Notre Dame, and I think we were all kind of expecting a breakout season out of him, and it didn't happen. Notre Dame's in a run-first offense, plus Hupie was hurt for most of the year, so he didn't really get the chance to. Moving on to running back, Kiki Rodriguez III out of Auburn has cemented himself as the top running back projected in this year's class. He is lucky that some of the really good junior running backs in college football all decided to return to school, but that doesn't take away the talent that this kid has. I mean, you look at the explosiveness and the game-wrecking ability with the ball in his hands. He's a very shifty and elusive runner, and he's the type of guy who can really spark an offense, which is why he's being looked at in the first round. Charles Wiggins and Nate Washington both had great seasons for their respective programs, upping their draft stocks. But I think the day two name to really watch is going to be Igby Prince out of North Carolina. North Carolina is a pass-first team, but that did not stop Igby Prince from having a great season on the ground. And along with that, he is a pretty good pass catcher out of the backfield. The thing that excites me about him is he does not have a lot of tread on the tires. He's never been a guy to get 20 touches a game, so because of that, he's a little bit less banged up than some of these other running backs entering the league. And looking at the running back position, those guys get hit so often. That means something. So I think Igby Prince's best football is ahead of him, and he's got a chance to be a really, really good player at the next level. Another possible third-round pick to look out for is LSU running back Ronnie DeRugi. LSU was really disappointing this season. They lost their first 7 games, and although they picked it up towards the end, they did not live up to expectations. DeRugi, I think, really embodies that. He had Heisman aspirations going into the season, and he wasn't bad this year, but he also wasn't great, and he started this season as the top projected running back in this class and was unable to hold that. However, he has impressed at the Combine. He did play really well to finish off the season, so I do still think he will probably be a day 2 selection for somebody looking for a running back. The Titans are really looking for a complimentary back alongside Derrick Henry in this year's draft. We didn't add any in free agency, so you've got to assume we're probably going to add one in day 3, and Benny Dixon could be that guy. Derrick Henry is obviously a tough physical runner, so we want someone to complement him who has more speed and explosiveness, and that's Benny Dixon's game to a T. He ran a 4.25 40-yard dash at the Combine, and he did even better at his pro day with a 4.24. He's probably going to be the fastest running back in the NFL next season, and I think he would be a perfect complement for Derrick Henry. If he's off the board, there are some good options later in the class. Patrick Dahlfriend had a great senior season this year for USC. He did miss the bowl game with an injury, but it's not a big deal. He was able to participate in the Combine just fine. USC was pretty bad a season ago, but Dahlfriend led the offense to a major shift as USC ended up finishing second place in the Big Ten West this season, largely in part to him. And again, he's a very explosive player. I think he has value as a receiver and would be a good complement for Derrick Henry. Moving down the board even further, I really like Rocket Reddick out of Minnesota. He lives up to his name quite well because, again, he is really, really fast. As you can tell, the Titans are prioritizing speed and elusiveness with a running back. That's why we're specifically looking at guys like Benny Dixon, Patrick Dahlfriend, and Rocket Reddick, who ran a 4.32 at the Combine and a 4.25 at his pro day. Those pro day numbers might be boosted up a little bit, but still, he's really fast and really explosive. As we move on to wide receiver, there are a lot of really talented players here, including Kayson Brouillette out of Oklahoma, the number 1 receiver for Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Masaru Lee. I've made it clear that the Titans are really looking for somebody who can be a weapon in the vertical passing game because they really missed explosiveness down the field last year, and I think Kayson Brouillette can provide that as a solid deep threat. 4.51 at the Combine, 4.47 at his pro day. Really good route runner, really good hands down the field. He's a deep threat in every sense of the name, and I think he could be a good number 1 receiver. Rambo Lumpkins from North Carolina has continued to move up stocks throughout the season, and even since the end of the season, he's been a pre-draft darling for a lot of scouts and has skyrocketed up board since the combine after a great performance with a 4.3 140. Got to keep in mind, he's 6'4", 230 pounds at just 21 years old. He had over 1,100 yards and 15 touchdowns this season with a backup quarterback at North Carolina. He is getting some real top 15 buzz and could be a good fit for the Titans in the first round. Another player who I think could be a good fit with the Titans' top draft pick is Scotty Pickens out of Arizona. Pickens statistically is one of the most accomplished receivers in college football history. Amongst all players in college football history, he's finished in the top 10 in catches, yards, and touchdowns ever. He's a highly productive four-year starter, and oh yeah, he runs a 4.24 40-yard dash. Everybody expected him to run a fast time, so I feel like his stock didn't really go up with his 40 time because everyone saw it coming. We knew he was that fast. Even going down the board further, there are a lot of other really good receivers, including John Vincent III out of Clemson. He's a big-bodied physical target, maybe not the quickest, maybe not as explosive with the ball in his hands, but he's a really good jump ball target. Throw it up for him. He's going to come down with it. As we move down the board even further, guys like Quentin Spencer, Hollis Francois, and Tyler Royal all could be first-round picks as well. Tyler Royal out of Oregon is especially an interesting case. Again, explosiveness is the name of the game with him. The problem is he does not have the best of hands. He's very inconsistent in terms of catching the football. We got to watch him in full in the Rose Bowl against Notre Dame, and he dropped 5 passes. Along with that, he's not a great separator, so although his stock did go down a little bit, he's too good with the ball in his hands to not be a top, say, 40 pick in this year's draft. Looking at some of the guys who could go on day 2, I really like Bryson Smith out of South Carolina. He had a great season this year for the Gamecocks. He can play on the outside and the slot. I think he's going to specialize operating from the slot in the NFL, but he has shown an ability to win vertically on the outside as well during his collegiate career. He tested better athletically than I would have expected, and if the Titans don't pick a guy like Bruyette, Lumpkins, or Scotty Pickens in the first round, Bryson Smith could be a really good second or third round pick. If not him, Jaden Wilson Miller could as well. Wilson Miller may not be the biggest or the fastest receiver, but he is such a technically sound player. Despite being the youngest player in the draft at 20 years old, he has some of the most pure football IQ of anybody in this class. He just knows how to get open. Think of guys like Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs, who may not have the true physical ability that some of the other top receivers do, but they're really technically sound, polished players. Trey Williams from South Alabama is another guy whose stock has really gone up this year. Williams, plain and simple, was the best receiver in the country this season with 25 touchdowns from the South Alabama offense. He tested better than I expected at the Combine, and although he wasn't all that impressive during the college football playoff, I still think he has earned being a day 2 pick. It's a pretty deep class at receiver as well. A lot of guys I like down here. Wouldn't be surprised to see the Titans maybe double up on a receiver, pick one early in the draft, and then pick another one possibly later in the draft. Moving on to tight end, which is a pretty big need for the Titans, I think Malachi James could be a really good fit with Tennessee's first-round selection, number 15 overall. James is a unicorn. He's 6'7", but he plays like a receiver despite being in the body of the power forward. He can box guys out going for the football. He's fast. He's explosive. He's pretty much 80% of Kyle Pitts, which I say that as a major compliment. He is also a very willing blocker as well. I think he's going to be at his best as an inline tight end, but you can line him at receiver as well. Sub 4.5 40-yard dash. I mean, this kid's an absolute freak, and I think he'd be a really fun addition to the Titans offense if they would like to add him. It is a pretty deep tight end class. There are a lot of guys I like down the board. Maciel Calchano and Muhammad McBride I think are going to be good day 2 picks. And then even going down the board, guys like Emeka Uruzier and Kayvon Chase could be gems later down the board. Moving on to the offensive line, another position that I think the Titans are going to look at early in this class. Noshawn Kimboyle out of Purdue is being looked at as a possible top 5 pick and is expected to be the top offensive lineman off the board. He's a big, long-armed, physical tackle who I think can be a blindside blocker in your offense for the next 10 years, and I do not think the Titans are going to have a chance to get him because he is a little bit too good. He tested very well during the Combine, and he could be the top offensive player who isn't a quarterback off the board in this year's class. Chidibere Chukwubukum out of Florida is going to be a really good consolation prize if you're unable to land a guy like Noshawn Kimboyle. Chukwubukum is also quite athletic as well. He also tested very well during the combine and is projected to go right around the range of the Titans' first selection. Sebastian Cross could be a first-round pick, and then even down the board, there are some pretty talented players as well. Moving on to left guard, I think Stephon Fingard out of Texas is probably the top offensive guard prospect in this year's draft class. He had a great season for the Longhorns, although Texas was a disappointment. Stephon Fingard was certainly not a disappointment. Another guy who could go projected in the Titans' range. They do kind of have a hole at left guard, so if the Titans were to draft Fingard, that'd be a great interior offensive line with him, Nate Davis, and Eric McCoy. Toa Tuigamala and Nathaniel Forrest-Smith are also pretty solid day 2 prospects as we move over to center. Keelan Aliu-Jones out of Notre Dame is a projected first-rounder. Center was high on the Titans' priority list going into the offseason. With the signing of Eric McCoy, that probably won't be the case, although I think McCoy does have guard flexibility. So if the Titans do really like Aliu-Jones, I still see an avenue where they could pick him. Aliu-Jones had a great season this year for the Fighting Irish, did miss some time with injury, but when he was on the field, he was really, really good. It's a super deep center class. Al Ravenwood III out of Iowa is a possible first-rounder as well. You don't normally find 2 centers who go in the first round, but there's so much talent at the center position in this year's class. Ravenwood's probably going to be more of a later first-round pick. Again, if the Titans are still interested in drafting a center, they could always move down about 10 spots in the first round and look at him as a possible trade-down candidate if that'd be something they'd be interested in doing. If you don't want to go center in the first round, do not worry. There are a lot of guys down the board who are pretty good. Tommy Kent, Tyshawn Stallings, Fritton Smith, and Gianluigi Mandariano are all really solid value picks later in the draft. Moving on to right tackle, we've got Daniel Forrest-Smith, 6'9" out of Texas. His brother Nathaniel Forrest-Smith, 6'10", is also in this class at guard as well. So Texas has the 2 best offensive guards in this year's class, yet Benedict Sparrow still found a way to throw 21 interceptions, but that's besides the point. Obviously, the size really jumps out with him. He tested very well athletically at the combine, cementing himself as a first-round pick. He's not just big. He is super athletic and quick, along with obviously being an ox on the offensive line as well. Looking at right tackle, you've got 3 surefire first-rounders, headlined by Ferdinand Sullivan III out of Alabama. 6'5", 335 pounds. He gives you the ideal size and length you look for at the offensive tackle position. He'll probably be the second offensive lineman off the board behind Noshawn Kimboyle out of Purdue. I don't think Sullivan's going to fall to the 15th pick where Tennessee is choosing in the first round. He could be a trade-up candidate. Again, I think offensive tackle is a pretty big need for the Titans. They were linked to Elkton Jenkins in free agency, although they didn't sign him. Luke Coghill out of Florida State's another fantastic player. Extremely productive as a 4-year starter with the Seminoles. I don't think he's going to fall to the 15th pick either, but he's another player who the Titans really, really like, and if he does fall to the 15th pick, I think he's going to be at the top of Tennessee's draft board as possibilities of players who they could look to select. I think Coghill is going to be a stud in the NFL. And then going down the board even further, one of the bigger wild cards in this draft for me is Xavier Merville out of Oklahoma. 6'8", 284 pounds, just declared as a true junior. One of the younger players in this class, and I do really like his athletic upside. The production's been very inconsistent in college, so I am a little bit fearful of that. But whoever drafts him is going to be getting a project player, but somebody who has a really high ceiling. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball now. Plenty of talent in terms of pass rushers. Roman Horn III is a possible top 5 to 10 pick. I'd be surprised if he falls out of the top 10. Horn kind of came out of nowhere this year with Southern Miss and had a great season, finishing second in the FBS with sacks at 10.5. I was very curious to see how Horn would perform at the Combine because when you watch him, it's easy to think that he just dominates against smaller competition and won't be an NFL-level player, but he tore up the Combine. 4.5 40-yard dash. He tested well in the agility drills, around 30 reps on the bench. He's an NFL-level athlete, and I think if he can just be a little bit more polished as a pass rusher, he'll be a stud. He's been getting some looks as a possible sleeper number 1 overall pick candidate. Behind him, I think Musa Adiwar out of Penn State's also pretty solid as a possible late first rounder. Again, he's a little bit technically raw as a pass rusher, and I think he could use to add some more true pass rushing moves. But if nothing else, he is going to be a good run stopper right away. Kind of reminds me of the guy like Kwity Paye coming out of Michigan as somebody who can, be lined up as an edge rusher or inside. As we move to right end, again, there are 2 first-round guys here, but you'll notice the depth at pass rusher is really impressive. We'll start with the 2 first-rounders, looking at Jair Savage out of Kentucky. He's another guy who can line up as an edge and inside. I really like his positional flexibility. This is another guy who's going to be a disruptor in the run game. I think he's a little better as a pass rusher on day 1 than Musa Adiwar, and I think he's a little bit better as an athlete as well. He's another guy who's getting sneakily top 5 to 10 pick buzz. I don't think he's going to be a top 10 pick, but I could see it. Anthony Brooks out of Notre Dame is very solid as well. Notre Dame has a lot of talent in the front 7, headlined by Anthony Brooks, who had a pretty solid senior season this year for Fighting Irish and looks to be a possible top 20 pick in this year's draft class. He tested pretty solidly at the Combine, cementing himself as a first-round pick, and could be a guy who I think really makes a solid impact as a pass rusher going forward. But as I said a minute ago, the depth, particularly at right end, is really something. Tyreek Callahan from South Alabama is a very fun player, only 20 years old, one of the youngest players in the class. This is somebody who's really broken out for the Jaguars and was one of the main reasons why they made the college football playoff. Callahan performed at a very high level in the playoff. He had a scoop and score in the semifinal win over Michigan. I think he's going to be a really good player at the next level. Jordan Ruffin out of the University of Central Florida is another player I really like. He really stepped up as a pass rusher this season, and I think it was really good to see because I do really like his pass rush upside. He's got one of the longest wingspans in this year's class, along with the fact that he's a pretty good run stopper as well. He tested at a pretty high level at the Combine, and I think the Titans will look to add pass rushing because outside of Harold Landry, nobody was really consistent going to the quarterback last year. Even on day 3, plenty more depth. Appas Phillips from Miami, I think, could be a guy who, in a few years, we can look upon this class and wonder, how the hell was he a 4th-round pick? Phillips had a career year with Miami. He didn't light the Combine on fire, but he did a pretty solid job in terms of his testing, and I think he's going to be a very good pro. Calvin Watson out of Southern Miss is also really good. Now, he has the benefit of lining alongside Roman Horn, who's going to be a top 10 pick, so you can use that against Watson, but I still think he is a really, really talented player. Another guy who has super long arms, and he's got a wide array of pass rush moves, and again, I think he's going to be looked at as a real steal in a couple of years. Defensive tackle is probably the weakest position in this class. There are some guys I like. Pete Peters, Zaire Savage II, and Matthew Allen are all pretty solid. Sukdeo Toussaint was the original top defensive tackle, but he missed most of the year with a broken collarbone, so his stock kind of fell. It's a really good linebacker class, headlined by Neville Franklin out of Florida. Franklin's stock has dipped a little bit, but I still think he'll probably be a first-round pick. He had a pretty solid season this year with the Gators, and although he is a little bit undersized, I still think he'll be a good player. He tested pretty well at the Combine, cementing himself as a first-round pick. Obviously, the size isn't ideal, but he plays bigger than his size suggests, so I think he'll be able to stick at linebacker. Hamilton Paxton out of Penn State is a very versatile player. I don't think he's ever going to be a great pass rusher. I think he's going to be more of an off-ball linebacker as a guy who can make plays in the run game and in coverage. The Titans have been heavily linked to drafting him. I don't think he'd be a great fit on the Titans defense. I think he's more of a 4-3 outside linebacker. So if the Titans were to draft him, they'd have to figure out if they're going to line him up as an edge rusher or as a traditional off-ball linebacker. And then going down the board, Daniel Truchon out of Georgia was one of the best players overall in the college football playoff. And some interesting younger players down the board there on day 3. Looking at middle linebacker, I think Octavius Thatcher has a real chance to be a top 5 pick when it's all said and done. He's an old school, hard-nosed, thumping linebacker, but he's also really athletic. And we've seen a lot of these athletic sideline-to-sideline linebackers be first-round picks in recent years, guys like Devin Bush, Patrick Queen, who haven't really worked out. I think Octavius Thatcher is a lot more instinctive than both of those guys. I think he's better in the run game, along with good ability in coverage as well. I have a hard time thinking he'll make it out of the top 10 because he's really good. Pretty deep group at middle linebacker as well. I don't think linebacker is a huge need for the Titans with how well Zach Cunningham and David Long played last year, but they could use some depth behind those two. At right outside linebacker, we look at Cyrus Okpoko Jr. out of Florida, the top non-quarterback in this year's class, and he is projected to be a top 3 pick. The word I would use to describe this kid's game is freak. He's 6'7", 260 pounds. He runs a sub-4.4 40-yard dash. He's pretty much a bigger version of Micah Parsons, but with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah's cover ability. That's pretty scary. There's a reason why he's being looked at as a top 3 pick, and I honestly wouldn't blame the Lions for picking him number 1, even with their big need at quarterback. Most teams will not get the opportunity to get Okpoko, and I think Jermaine Hicks from Indiana is going to be a really good consolation prize. No, he is not the physical specimen that Cyrus Okpoko is, but I think he's going to be a really good, versatile linebacker. I think you can line him up as an edge rusher, and I think he could be a pretty good pass rusher, but I also think he has good ability off the ball as somebody who can cover, as somebody who can stop the run. He doesn't really have any major weaknesses, and I think he's going to be a good pro. Kendall Zavitz, Montague Coriolis, and Isaiah Ramirez are all possible first-rounders. And then there are some solid depth players down the board, guys like Justin Savage, Guido Lekovici, and Kazavan Kachachorian. There is no position in this draft class stronger than cornerback. So much talent here. Even though corner's not a need at all for the Titans, they're probably going to draft one anyway because there's so many good ones. Headlined by Marcus Moore out of Alabama, who's a really good player. He's 6'2". He's got good size, good length, very high production. I wasn't overly high on his athleticism, but he dominated in the combine, doing well in the jumping and agility drills. He ran a 4.36. I think he has proven himself as a top 5 pick, probably the second defensive player off the board after Cyrus Okpoko. Behind him, you've got probably 4 other first-rounders. Seattle Jackson had a great season for Florida State, picking off 7 passes, really breaking out on what was one of the best defenses in college football, as probably Florida State's best defensive player, which says a lot because they're going to have 4 or 5 guys on that side of the ball who get drafted this year. 4.41 at the combine, 4.35 at his pro day. A little bit inconsistent in coverage, but the ball skills are great. I think he's going to be a fantastic player. Jalen Matthews, the second out of Purdue, has been a very consistent 4-year starter. He's gotten at least 3 interceptions in every season as a Boilermaker. He had 7 as a junior, went back down to earth as a senior with 3, but he's still really solid. Good size, good length, decent enough athleticism. He didn't have a great combine, but he didn't do too bad. I think he'll be a first-round pick and a pretty good player at the NFL level. Wyatt Darby from Texas is very interesting. He's 6'3". He's got a lot of height, 6'6" wingspan. This kid is a freak athlete, tested really well at the combine. But the problem with him is the lack of production. He hasn't played at a consistent level at Texas, which is why he's not being looked at as a surefire top 15 pick. But if you can develop this young man to his ceiling, he's got a shot to be really good because there are not many corners who are 6'3" with 6'6" wingspans who run a sub-4.35 40-yard dash. So he's a little bit of a project, but I think he could be really good. Cardell Simpson from South Alabama is one of my favorite players in the class. Obviously, the ball skills stand out to you immediately. 13 interceptions as a junior, 7 as a senior, including 1 against Michigan in the college football playoff. But this kid's character is really what excites me. He was the heart and soul of this South Alabama team who made the college football playoff. He had a similar impact to his team as a guy like Sauce Gardner did at Cincinnati, playing for another Group 5 school making the college football playoff. No, Simpson is not the prospect that Sauce Gardner is, but he's going to be really, really good. I think he'd be a great fit for the Titans defense. C.J. Thomas Jr. out of LSU is very talented as well. We all know his dad, C.J. Thomas, who was a great ball-hawking corner for the Philadelphia Eagles in our Madden franchise last year. The name of C.J. Thomas's game is find the football and make a play. Career high, 10 interceptions in one season. I think he had 8 in another. And his son plays a lot like him. Just like Pops, C.J. Thomas Jr. is big, he's long, he's wiry, and he knows how to find the football. He had a great junior season, declared for the draft early, and is being projected as a late first, early second round pick, right around where his dad ended up getting drafted last year in the season 1 draft by the Philadelphia Eagles. I think he's going to be a really fun player. Going down the board even further, you've got guys like Brad Bellaford, who's got that dog in him, if you know what I mean, and then A.J. Brown as well out of Notre Dame. Those are up to 8 corners who could go in the first round. So much depth here. Then going down the board even further. Plenty of great day 2 corners and even a lot of guys on day 3 who I really like as well. I think corner might be the Titans' strongest position. They have 4 really good players all on their rookie contract. And we're still probably going to pick a corner anyway because a lot of these guys are so good. I feel like we have to pick one. And then finally, as we move on to safety, safety is a lot weaker than corner. There are some guys who could go in the first round. Kenyon Mills, Caitlin Ingram are solid 3 safeties. But I think Alex Weldy out of Oregon might be really the name to watch here. He's not the biggest guy, 5'9", 170. He's actually pretty small, but he's a highly instinctive player. I really like his versatility. He's somebody you can put at either safety spot. You can put him in the nickel as well. He's gotten to some reps at outside corner as well. He's a center field type of safety. You can put him alone back deep, and he can cover a whole lot of space. And I think he's going to be a really, really good pro despite his physical limitations. A lot of talented players down the board, including, of course, Aurelio Johnson, the big hero from NC State, as we move over to strong safety. Gabe Feldstedt out of Oklahoma is a really, really good player. In my opinion, Feldstedt is the best safety in this draft class. I think he could be a really good trade-down candidate with the Titans' first pick, or he could be a really good trade-up candidate with their second pick. He's a versatile safety. You can put him, again, at either safety spot. You can put him in the nickel. You can put him at sub-linebacker. Good athlete, good size, good ball skills, good ability in the run game. There aren't any weaknesses with this game, which is why I think he's really good. Here are the special teamers as well. I don't anticipate we're going to draft one because our kicker and our punter are both really good. So there you go. There's our rundown of the draft class. Really talented group of players. Let's do some mock drafting now. If you guys have been around the channel for a little while, you know I'm a huge mock draft nerd. The Titans have 10 picks. We have one in every round except for the 5th, which we have 4 picks in. So hopefully we can take advantage of all of these selections. Let's take a look at some of the first-round mock drafts that Madden has. We're going to start with mock draft 3. This is the one made at the end of the regular season with Roman Horn going number 1. I have a hard time thinking the Lions won't pick Clyde Williamson, and even if they don't pick Williamson, Cyrus Okpoko is right there, man. They have Basaru Lee going at 7 to the Eagles. They have Lee going to the Eagles in all 3 mock drafts. As for the Titans, they have us going with Hamilton Paxton, number 15 overall. It'd be a little bit unfortunate if guys like Coghill, James, and Pickens are all off the board by the time we make our selection. No other quarterbacks here in the first round of this mock draft, but as you'll see, that'll change as we go into these ones. So they have Clyde Williamson going number 1 of the Lions, as expected. Not much changes early on other than him and Horn swapping. Again, Masaru Lee 7 to the Eagles, and they again have us going with Hamilton Paxton, the linebacker out of Penn State, although Malachi James and Scotty Pickens were both available for that pick. And then they had the Packers going with Genesis Moon, the quarterback out of Florida, late in the first round. And then mock draft 5, again, pretty similar towards the top. They did change our pick, though. They have us going with Malachi James, the tight end out of San Diego State, who, again, I think would be a really, really good fit for our offense. I decided to make a 7-round mock draft for just the Titans, not the entire league. That's too much. Now, I'm not saying these are the players I am going to pick, but this is what the draft could look like for the Titans if they don't make any moves. So with the first round pick, I had us getting Luke Coghill out of Florida State. I think there's a good chance Coghill won't be on the board. This might be wishful thinking, but if he is on the board, I think he'd be a great pick for us. I didn't really know what to do in the second round. I decided to give us Daniel Truchon out of Georgia. He was excellent in the college football playoff, and I think he can line him as an edge rusher and as a solid linebacker. Jaden Wilson-Miller, very talented receiver out of Alabama in the third round. And then we've got a lot of day 3 picks, really focusing on defense early on with Napoleon Dobbs, a corner out of Oklahoma, and Calvin Watson, the pass rusher from Southern Miss. I also had us getting Emeka Uwuzie, the tight end out of Alabama, Sekou Bateau, an offensive guard from Georgia, Patrick Daufriend, the running back out of USC. Again, I'm really convinced we're going to have the Titans pick a running back at some point, probably on day 3. We really want to add a complement for Derrick Henry out of the backfield. I don't want to give Derrick Henry 300 touches a year. I don't want to run him into the ground. And I think a player like Daufriend could be a pretty good fit, although there are a lot of running backs even farther down the board who we could look at as well. And then as for our final 2 selections, I had us going with Xander Valsamas, a center out of Mississippi State, and then Letty Amon, a super speedy wide receiver out of South Carolina. I think he ran a sub 4.3. And then I have a long list of possibly 7th round to undrafted players who we could look at as well. Those guys are all projected in the 7th round or later. Most of them are projected as priority undrafted free agents. They could get drafted, but if they don't, we will certainly be looking to add them as an undrafted free agent. We have one more order of business to take care of, and that is our private workouts. We can invite 3 players to the facility and get them for a private workout. The players I ended up choosing are Scotty Pickens, the wide receiver from Arizona, Luke Coghill, the offensive tackle from Florida State, and then Gabe Feldstead, the safety out of Oklahoma. I really wanted to focus on players who I think I would consider in the first round because I really want to get our top draft pick right, and then from there I trust the work that our scouts have done on some of the later round players. So that's going to wrap up the episode. I hope everybody enjoyed. Next episode is the 2023 NFL Draft, which, as I said earlier, I'm planning to premiere this Sunday. Let me know what players you would like to see us choose in this year's draft. It's going to be a really fun episode. You guys know I put a ton of work into my draft episodes, so it's going to be great. That'll wrap it up again. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. Peace out. Tighten up.